The footage showed something that shouldn't exist. 8 feet tall, wrapped in shadows, matted hair, eyes that stared straight into the lens, intelligent eyes, reflecting something ancient. It was the moment that changed everything for 4 people who thought they were just buying a gold mine. 3 months earlier, Marcus Chen had been sitting in his Silicon Valley office, staring at bankruptcy papers. The tech startup he had poured his life savings into collapsed overnight when their lead investor pulled out. Across town, Sarah Martinez was packing up the broken-down equipment from her failed restaurant, 20 years of culinary dreams reduced to a storage unit. Jake Morrison had just been handed his layoff notice after 15 years with a construction firm, another casualty of the housing crash. And Elena Volkov had sold her photography studio, unable to compete with smartphones and social media influencers. 4 strangers, each carrying the wreckage of their own failed dreams, found themselves in the same bankruptcy lawyer's office on a bleak Tuesday morning. As they sat in the waiting room, Marcus noticed the hollow look in the other's eyes, the same desperate energy of people who had nothing left. That's when he saw the auction listing on his phone. An abandoned gold mine in Northern California. 47 acres. Starting bid, $25,000. Vacant for 30 years after the last mining operation went bankrupt. Environmental surveys showed no contamination. Recent geological reports hinted at untouched deposits still buried deep inside. Marcus lifted his eyes from the phone to the strangers across from him. Sarah was counting crumpled bills in her wallet. Jake stared at his calloused hands. Elena clutched her worn camera bag like it was all she had left. "Anyone here interested in owning a gold mine?" Marcus asked. 2 weeks later, they were standing at the edge of their new property. 4 unlikely partners, pooling what little they had left for one final shot at financial survival. The mine entrance gaped before them like a mouth carved into the mountainside, framed with decades-old timber supports left to rot. The forest crowded close towering pines and twisted oaks, filtering sunlight into shifting patterns on the forest floor. A creek ran nearby, its water running clear over granite smoothed by centuries of flow. According to the geological surveys, that creek had been the original source of placer gold, sparking the mine's founding back in the 1892. Sarah walked the perimeter, her instincts as a restaurant owner kicking in. She mentally listed everything they would need: a generator, water filtration, food stores rugged enough to last through mountain weather. Her business had failed, but logistics was second nature to her. Jake studied the mine entrance with a contractor's eye. The support beams were Douglas fir, solid, dependable. With some reinforcement and the right safety equipment, the main tunnel could be made accessible again. His years of construction work told him the original operators had known what they were doing. Elena documented everything through her lens, seeing beauty where others only saw ruin. Morning light caught the creek, turning it into liquid gold. The mine entrance framed perfectly against the mountainside. The photos, she thought, could tell their story if this insane venture ever actually worked. Meanwhile, Marcus scrolled through geological reports on his tablet. His background in tech made him comfortable with data and projections, and the numbers looked promising. The mine had produced over $2 million in gold before financial troubles forced its closure. Modern techniques could reach veins that the original miners never could. They gave themselves 3 months. If they couldn't pull enough gold to cover startup and operating costs, they'd sell the land and cut their losses. Not exactly a business plan, but better than giving up entirely. The first week passed in a blur of hurried preparation. They built a base camp near the mine entrance. Heavy-duty tents, generators, food supplies laid out with Sarah's careful planning. Jake worked on shoring up the mine entrance and installing safety gear. Elena documented their progress with her camera, pitching in whenever extra hands were needed. Marcus managed supplies and researched mining techniques on his laptop whenever the generator was running. The work was harder than any of them had imagined. Even with modern tools, mining was grueling, backbreaking labor that left them exhausted by sunset each day. Jake's construction background gave them a foundation, but the others had to start from scratch. How to handle a metal detector, how to pan for flakes in the creek, how to spot promising rock formations. Little by little, though, they began to turn up traces of gold, tiny flakes in the stream bed, specks in rock samples pulled from the tunnel. Nothing life-changing, but enough to keep their hopes alive. That was when Elena found the first footprint. She was out at the creek one early morning, framing shots of the sunrise spilling across the water when she saw it pressed deep into the muddy bank, clear against the soft ground. At first glance, it looked human. 5 toes, an arch, a heel, but the proportions were all wrong. Elena set her size 8 hiking boot beside the print. The mysterious track was nearly twice as long and much wider. Whatever made it had to be massive. "Hey, come look at this," she called out. Marcus was the first to arrive, tablet in hand as always. He studied the print, then the boot. "It has to be a barefoot track, right? Maybe the mud distorted it somehow." Sarah joined them, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Years of running a restaurant had taught her to spot signs of pests and animals. She shook her head. "I've seen barefoot prints before. This isn't one. Look at the toe spacing. That's human-like, but the proportions don't make sense." Jake crouched beside it, his contractor's eye taking in every detail. "Depth says whatever made this was heavy. Look how far it sank into the mud. And here," he pointed further along the bank. More depressions, a whole trail leading into the tree line. They followed the prints for nearly 50 yards before losing them on firmer ground. Each step held the same impossible proportions. Upright, bipedal, and far heavier than any person. "Some mountain hermit," Jake suggested. "Guy could be huge." "An 8-foot hermit?" Elena shot back. "Barefoot in the mountains?" Marcus pulled up a search on his tablet. There have been reports of Sasquatch sightings in this region for decades. Native tribes have stories about giant beings in the forests. But this, he tapped the photo Elena had just taken, "this is the first physical evidence I've actually seen documented." Sarah gave a nervous laugh. "So what, we're really talking Bigfoot now? We came here to mine gold, not chase monsters." But that night, the sounds began. It started around midnight, a low call, almost a howl, echoing from multiple directions at once, rolling off the mountainsides until the source was impossible to pin down. None of them were wildlife experts, but the noise didn't match anything they knew. Too deep for a coyote, too long for a wolf, too deliberate for a bear. Elena lay in her tent, camera beside her, listening as the eerie calls seemed to circle their camp. The sounds weren't random. They carried a strange cadence, almost patterned, as if whatever made them was studying the group's position. "Are you hearing this?" Marcus whispered from his tent. "Hard to miss," Jake muttered. "Do we check it out?" "Absolutely not," Sarah cut in firmly. "Whatever's out there can stay out there. We'll look around in the morning." The calls went on for over an hour before fading into silence. None of them slept well. Morning brought new discoveries. Around the camp, more tracks in the soft earth circling their tents, some within 10 feet of where they'd been sleeping. Near the food cache, signs that something had inspected their supplies, though nothing had been taken. Elena crouched low, photographing the clearest impressions. "Look at this pattern. It's consistent. And here, approaching from a different angle. That's deliberate. That's intelligent behavior." Marcus logged everything meticulously on his tablet, methodical in his data collection. If this is real, if there's an undiscovered species out here, we're sitting on a discovery worth more than any gold vein. Jake wasn't convinced. Or we're being stalked by something strong enough to rip us apart. Those tracks aren't just big, they're powerful. Sarah studied the disturbed ground near their supplies. It was careful. Didn't break a thing. If it were a bear, our containers would be shredded. Whatever this is, it investigated and left everything intact. Despite the unease, they chose to keep working, mining during the day, keeping watch at night, every one of them aware now that they weren't alone in the mountains. They kept working, but with new precautions. Someone always stayed back at camp while the others went into the mine. They ringed the perimeter with motion-triggered cameras. Elena never let her DSLR out of reach. The following week fell into a rhythm. They mined during the day, pulling just enough gold dust to keep their hopes alive. At night, the howls returned. And each morning, more tracks appeared in the dirt, circling, watching, but never closing in. Whatever was out there seemed content to observe from a distance. Marcus dove into research, tethering his laptop to their satellite uplink. He pored over Sasquatch databases and old reports. The plaster casts he studied online matched Elena's photographs almost perfectly. The sounds they had captured on Elena's recorder lined up with audio archives from sightings all across the Pacific Northwest. "There's an entire community devoted to this," Marcus told the others one night as they sat around the fire. "Thousands of reports, footprints, recordings, but never one clear, undeniable piece of film." Elena polished her lens and looked up. "You mean no one's ever gotten a sharp shot?" "There are videos," Marcus admitted, "but they're always blurry, too far away, or obvious hoaxes. It's like the creature avoids cameras. Either it's painfully shy or very, very smart," Sarah finished, stirring their camp dinner. "If you were the last of your kind, wouldn't you be careful around humans too?" Jake scrolled through their surveillance feeds on Marcus's tablet. "Speaking of cameras, look at this." He handed the screen around. Every motion sensor camera they'd installed shut off at exactly the same time between midnight and dawn. Not broken, just dead. During the day and evening, the cameras worked flawlessly, capturing deer at the creek and raccoons sniffing around their supplies. But come midnight, the feeds went dark, only to resume at sunrise. Glitch in the system? Marcus offered, though his voice betrayed doubt. They all fail at the same time every night, Jake said flatly. Elena shook her head. Something's disabling them. On purpose. That night, Elena made a choice. Instead of sleeping, she settled near the mine entrance with her camera and a night vision scope. If something intelligent was shutting down their equipment, maybe it wouldn't expect a human lying in wait. She sat in the dark, listening. Around 11:30, the forest changed. The constant insect chorus cut off like someone had flipped a switch. The woods held its breath. Then came the footsteps. Not tentative. Not probing. These were deliberate, confident strides. Heavy, yet uncannily quiet for something so large. Elena raised the camera, peering through the green glow of the scope. At first, she saw nothing but trees and shadow, then movement. Something massive shifting between the pines, always just at the edge of sight. She adjusted her position, heart pounding, and then it stepped into a clearing, bathed in moonlight 50 yards away. Elena stopped breathing. Through the lens, the figure was undeniable. 8 feet tall, its body covered in dark brown hair that shimmered under the moon, shoulders broad, chest powerful, arms longer than any human's brow. It turned and looked straight at her. The face was what froze her, not human, not animal, something in between. Intelligent eyes caught the moonlight, a strong brow, a high nose. The expression wasn't savage, it was aware, curious, even dignified. For 30 endless seconds, they stared at one another across the clearing. Elena's finger trembled over the shutter. This was it, the proof the world had been waiting for. And then the creature tilted its head, as though puzzled by her hesitation. What it did next would haunt Elena for the rest of her life. It raised one massive hand and waved. Her reflex finally broke. She pressed the shutter. The flash exploded, freezing the clearing in stark detail. The raised hand, the intelligent eyes locked on hers, a moment of contact between two species sharing the same forest. Then the giant was gone, vanishing into the trees with impossible speed for its size. Elena sat trembling, camera clutched to her chest, knowing she had captured something that would change their lives forever. When she showed the others the photo the next morning, the reaction was immediate. Marcus stared, breathless. "My God, do you realize what this means? This is the clearest image of Sasquatch ever taken." Sarah wasn't impressed. Her voice was low, grim. "It's terrifying. Look at the size of it. Those hands could crush any one of us without trying." Jake examined the technical details of the shot. The lighting was flawless. The focus razor sharp. No skeptic could dismiss it as blurred or fake. "Elena," he whispered, "you just photographed a legend." But Elena wasn't thinking about fame or fortune. She kept replaying the look in those eyes, the deliberate wave. It knew I was there. It posed. It wanted me to take that photo. Marcus was already sketching out a plan. "We need to contact researchers immediately. That photo is worth millions research grants, documentary contracts, scientific recognition. This changes everything." "Wait." Elena cut him off, her voice steady. "Before we do anything, we need to think. That creature has lived peacefully in these mountains for who knows how long. If we release this, what happens to its safety? Its privacy?" Sarah nodded slowly. "She's right. The moment this goes public, the mountains will flood with researchers, thrill seekers, hunters. Whatever's survived here all these years will be destroyed." Jake wrestled with both excitement and unease. "But this is one of the greatest discoveries of modern science. Don't we have a responsibility to share it?" Marcus barely looked up, scrolling through contacts on his tablet. Major networks would pay 6 figures for exclusive rights. Scientific journals would fight for it. This solves all our financial problems forever. Elena stared at the photo glowing on her camera screen. The creature's raised hand no longer felt like just a gesture. It felt like a greeting, a neighbor acknowledging another. "What if," she said quietly, "instead of selling proof, we try to make contact, learn about how it lives, what it needs, make sure any scientific interaction is respectful, not invasive." That night, they reached a decision. They would attempt peaceful communication before going public. Elena's nightly vigils would continue, but with a different goal: not to hide, not to capture, to connect. The following evening, Elena returned to the moonlit clearing where she had taken the photo. This time she sat openly on a fallen log, her camera visible but lowered. She wanted the message clear. She wasn't there to hunt or threaten. Around midnight, the forest grew silent once again. The heavy steps approached. The same figure emerged from the tree line, but instead of keeping to the shadows, it stepped into the clearing, stopping only 20 feet away. Up close, it was staggering. 8.5 feet tall, shoulders built like a load-bearing pillar, covered in thick, well-kept fur that suggested intelligence in grooming. Elena raised her hand slowly and waved, mimicking the gesture from the night before. After a pause, the creature raised its own massive hand and waved back, careful, deliberate, unmistakably intentional. For the next hour, they experimented with gestures. Elena pointed to herself, then to the creature, nodding and receiving nods in return. She held up fingers, watching it mimic with enormous hands. The intelligence was undeniable. This was no mindless beast. It could think, learn, communicate. When Elena finally stood to leave, the creature mirrored her. It watched her pack up, then tilted its head toward the mine entrance, almost like a question. Elena pantomimed digging, then held up small stones to represent gold. The creature nodded, understanding. Then it pointed to itself, sweeping its arm toward the forest. The message was clear. You take the mine, I take the forest. We coexist, so long as each respects the other. Over the following weeks, their nightly meetings became routine. Elena started calling it Walker, a name born from its confident stride. Walker grew fascinated with her technology, watching intently as she handled the camera, yet always careful not to come too close. Sometimes Walker brought gifts, unusual stones from deep in the forest, rusted fragments of ancient tools, relics of long-forgotten mining. Once, it placed before her a nugget of pure gold, larger than anything Elena's team had uncovered. The implication was staggering. Walker knew where the gold was. Perhaps it had watched human mining in these mountains for generations. Perhaps it understood exactly what Elena's group was searching for. Meanwhile, the official mining operation was beginning to show real promise. But Elena knew their greatest treasure was no longer buried in the rock. It was walking beside her at night under the silver light of the moon. Under Walker's subtle guidance conveyed through Elena's nightly encounters, the group uncovered a vein that yielded a substantial amount of gold. Not enough to make them rich, but certainly enough to clear their debts and fund a modest mining operation. Marcus was torn between scientific exhilaration and business pragmatism. The gold could secure their financial future, but the discovery of Walker could revolutionize humanity's understanding of evolution, intelligence, and our place in the natural world. Sarah had grown protective of Walker, even bringing extra food to Elena's night meetings. The creature was cautious about anything man-made, but eventually accepted fruit and vegetables. Its diet revealed an omnivore with a sophisticated sense of food selection. Jake was astonished by Walker's grasp of their mining. Somehow, the creature knew which sections of the mine were safe and which should be avoided. Its guidance had prevented a potentially deadly collapse. But Elena began to realize Walker held deeper secrets. During one of their evening exchanges, its gestures hinted at more individuals. At first, she thought it meant her 3 companions. Then, Walker pointed deeper into the forest, raising its fingers to indicate a larger number. There were others. Walker was not alone. The next night, Walker led Elena to the edge of a hidden valley about a mile from camp. Through her night vision scope, she saw structures, stones, and fallen trees arranged deliberately into sheltered spaces. Movement between them suggested more towering figures. Walker pointed at the settlement, then at itself, then gestured. Family, community, home, Elena understood. This wasn't a solitary creature, it was a community that had lived in secrecy for generations. The weight of that knowledge was overwhelming. She was looking at evidence of a hidden civilization, one that had survived centuries of human expansion by remaining invisible. The photo she had taken was not merely documentation of an unknown species. It was a glimpse of a culture that had chosen isolation to endure. That night, Elena made a decision that would shape the rest of their journey. She deleted the photograph. Sitting in her tent, camera in hand, she scrolled to the image that could have made them rich and famous, the perfect face of Walker, hand raised in greeting, intelligence blazing in those remarkable eyes. She imagined the media frenzy, the scientific expeditions, the inevitable destruction of Walker's peaceful community. Then she pressed delete. When she told the others the next morning, their reactions were exactly what she expected. Marcus exploded. That photo was worth millions. Proof of the greatest scientific discovery of our time. How could you erase it? Sarah was more understanding. Elena's protecting Walker and its family. I get that. But shouldn't the world know they exist? Don't they deserve recognition, protection under the law? Jake was pragmatic. What's done is done, but we still know where they are. We still have a chance to make contact, maybe even form some kind of official relationship. Elena shook her head. Walker made it clear. They want to remain hidden. They've survived this long by avoiding humans. Our job isn't to expose them. It's to respect that choice and safeguard their secret. Marcus opened his tablet, frustrated. Think of what we could learn from them, their culture, their language, their knowledge. They could teach us about sustainable living, about coexisting with nature. And what would we teach them? Elena asked. How to deal with media swarms, tourists, scientists tearing apart their home until it's a theme park? Is that what you want for them? The debate raged for hours, but finally they struck a compromise. They would finish their 3-month mining contract without revealing Walker's existence to the outside world. If their mining operation proved profitable enough to sustain them, they would stay on as unofficial guardians of Walker's community. If not, they would leave the mountains, taking Walker's secret with them. The final month of their mining operation proved to be the most successful. With Walker's continued guidance, filtered through Elena's nightly exchanges, they uncovered deposits richer than even their most optimistic predictions. Not enough to make them millionaires, but certainly enough to establish a legitimate mining enterprise. More importantly, they had discovered something far more valuable than gold. They had learned that intelligence and awareness were not uniquely human traits, that two profoundly different species could coexist in peace and even in mutual benefit. Some secrets were worth protecting more than any financial profit. On the last night before their 3-month deadline, Elena met Walker one final time at their familiar meeting place. She had carefully prepared a message using the system of gestures they had developed. Her team would stay. They would continue small-scale mining while serving as guardians of Walker's secret. Walker's response took her by surprise. Instead of relief or gratitude, the creature looked sorrowful. Through gestures and expression, Walker explained that his community had debated the humans for weeks. They had proven themselves trustworthy, but their presence still carried risk. Even well-meaning people could make mistakes that would expose the secret. The decision had been made. Walker's community would move deeper into the mountains, away from all human activity. They would leave behind the territory they had called home for generations rather than face the danger of discovery. Tears stung Elena's cheeks as she realized the immense price her team's presence had exacted. Walker's people were now environmental refugees, driven from their homeland by the mere knowledge that humans knew they existed. Walker seemed to understand her anguish. The great creature reached out and gently touched Elena's shoulder, a gesture of comfort between friends who might never see one another again. Then Walker reached into a pouch woven from plant fibers and produced a final gift, a carved stone etched with markings that resembled writing. Not random scratches, but deliberate symbols, signs of language, of culture, of meaning. Elena accepted the carved stone with trembling hands, knowing she held proof of Walker's civilization. Not the kind of proof that could ever be published or sold, but a personal testament that her experience had been real. Walker stood taller than Elena beneath the moonlight. The creature scanned the clearing one last time before turning back to her. It raised its hand in their familiar gesture of greeting, but this time, the motion carried the weight of farewell. Elena lifted her hand in return, watching as Walker vanished into the forest for the last time. 6 months later, Elena and her partners were running a modestly successful mining operation. They had pulled enough gold to pay their debts, sustain themselves comfortably, and even hire a handful of local workers. Marcus had channeled his tech skills into streamlining the mine's logistics. Sarah opened a small restaurant in the nearest town. Jake launched a construction business focused on eco-friendly mining infrastructure. Elena returned to photography, but with a different focus. She captured the natural beauty of their mountain valley, creating images that celebrated the wilderness without exposing its secrets. Her work sold widely to environmental magazines and conservation groups. None of them ever spoke publicly about Walker or the hidden community they had discovered. Their official story was simple. 4 failed entrepreneurs pooled their remaining resources to restart an abandoned gold mine and found modest success through hard work and modern techniques. But Elena still carried Walker's carved stone in her camera bag, a reminder that the greatest discoveries couldn't be measured in gold or fame. Sometimes the real treasure was knowing when to keep a secret. On quiet nights, when the mountain winds carried sounds that might have been distant howls, Elena would touch the carved stone and remember the moonlit intelligence in Walker's eyes, the gentle wave of a giant's hand, and the moment she chose protection over profit. The mine had salvaged their financial future, but Walker had saved something far more important: their understanding of what it truly meant to share the world with another thinking species and the responsibility that knowledge demanded. In her tent at night, Elena sometimes wondered whether Walker's community had found a new home deeper in the mountains, whether they were safe, whether they were happy, whether they ever thought about the 4 humans who had briefly shared their forest. But above all, she felt gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to have met Walker, gratitude for the wisdom to guard his secret, and gratitude that somewhere, hidden deep in the vast wilderness of the mountains, an ancient intelligence still thrived, protected and enduring, just as it had for countless generations before humankind ever dreamed of gold.